This might be the most exciting news for gun owners in years, and some folks are actually pushing for it despite all the usual roadblocks. Could it be that we're on the verge of finally removing suppressors from the National Firearms Act once and for all? In this video, we'll talk about the long-awaited Hearing Protection Act, why it matters, how it could change the way we legally purchase and own suppressors, and everything you need to know about it. First, let's clear something up. Suppressors are not the Hollywood silencers you see in spy movies. They don't magically render a gunshot whisper quiet. Instead, they reduce the decibel level enough to protect your ears from permanent damage, which is especially important for those who spend a lot of time at the range or out in the woods hunting. Sadly, because of the outdated National Firearms Act of 1934, getting a suppressor has long been a headache. Paying a $200 tax stamp, waiting months or even up to a year for approval, and completing a mountain of paperwork just for a tool that makes shooting safer and more comfortable. Many of us have been frustrated with this process, and that's exactly why the Hearing Protection Act is so exciting. It aims to reclassify suppressors, pull them out of the NFA purgatory, and treat them more like ordinary firearms accessories rather than contraband reserved for secret agents or criminals. If you're new to the topic, the original motivation for including suppressors in the NFA was largely speculative, fueled by fears that criminals might abuse so-called silent weapons. The reality is that actual crimes committed with suppressors are extremely rare. They're already being used responsibly by millions of law-abiding citizens who've jumped through the legal hoops and spent all that extra money just to protect their hearing and be courteous to neighbors who might not appreciate the sound of gunfire echoing through their backyards. But imagine if all those cumbersome hoops could disappear. Think about how many more people could shoot without risking long-term hearing loss. This bill could open the door to a safer, more sensible firearm culture, one where suppressors are seen as a piece of protective equipment rather than a suspicious item that only criminals would want. Right now, Congressman Ben Cline has reintroduced this bill in the House, and it's already attracted a sizable group of co-sponsors who share our passion for common-sense Pro-2A legislation. Many of these co-sponsors recognize that the bureaucratic red tape hurts ordinary folks far more than it does criminals. Criminals, after all, aren't bothering with legal suppressors. They're certainly not filling out ATF Form 4, waiting months for approval, or paying for tax stamps. The system, in its current form, only punishes the people who care about following the law. That's one of the biggest reasons the Hearing Protection Act has garnered so much support from organizations like the American Suppressor Association, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and the NRA. These groups see the HPA as a logical step forward, letting us align with many European countries, yes, Europe, where suppressors are often encouraged for hearing safety and noise control. There's more to the story, though. It's easy to assume that once a bill is introduced, it just needs a simple majority vote, a signature from the president, and voila, we're done. But that's rarely how things work in Washington. In the House of Representatives, the bill seems to stand on solid ground. With the right momentum and a Republican majority, the chances look strong. But the Senate is a different animal, where we'll likely face a filibuster unless we can pull in 7 Democrats to stand with us on this. Some Democrats are sympathetic to the argument for hearing safety, yet they might hesitate if they think their constituents will interpret it as making guns more dangerous. We know the exact opposite is true, but politics is often about perception over reality. There's also another potential hurdle lurking in the text of the bill. The current language redefines suppressors in a way that includes individual components like tubes or outer shells. That means if someone wanted to build their own suppressor, commonly done through a Form 1 process, they might face a new layer of legal confusion. Owning an empty tube that you plan to turn into a suppressor could be considered the same as owning a fully assembled suppressor, which could be problematic if you haven't already gone through the proper procedure. Why is this in the bill? Some speculate it's a compromise strategy. Lawmakers may have inserted that language to calm people on the fence, hoping to say, look, we're not loosening all restrictions entirely. We're just making it easier for those who want finished, regulated suppressors. Whether you find that acceptable or not depends on how strongly you feel about do-it-yourself builds. But keep that in mind as we move forward, because it might be the sticking point that keeps the final legislation from pleasing everyone. And that leads to something crucial. Even if the Hearing Protection Act passes the House, gets through the Senate, and makes it to a president's desk, there's the question of whether or not it would be signed into law. Remember, this has come up before, and in the past, we've had Republican presidents who weren't exactly keen on suppressors. The last time it nearly passed, an unfortunate high-profile shooting incident happened right as it was moving to a vote, which led to the bill getting shelved. Timing and public optics can make or break legislation like this. But if 2A supporters keep the conversation focused on hearing protection and safer shooting experiences, rather than letting the media depict suppressors as villainous silencers, we stand a much better chance of turning this proposal into a reality. By the way, if you're finding this breakdown useful, do me a favor. Please like, share, subscribe, and tap that notification bell. Your support helps this channel grow and reach more people who care about their rights and freedoms. There's a lot of noise out there trying to drown out pro-2A voices, and every bit of engagement really makes a difference in keeping these conversations alive. Now let's delve deeper into why the Hearing Protection Act is being celebrated by so many firearm owners across the nation. It's not just about convenience or saving $200, though that's significant. It's about acknowledging that suppressors do not pose the unique danger that the NFA once claimed they did. They're safety devices. Instead of punishing people for wanting to protect their ears, we should be saying, yes, it's good you don't want to lose your hearing while practicing your marksmanship or hunting in the backwoods. And from an even broader perspective, making suppressors more accessible reduces noise pollution. Neighbors of firing ranges or those who live in rural areas where people shoot on private property would definitely appreciate this. In many European countries, suppressors are viewed as polite and considerate to others. Isn't it ironic that the United States, the supposed champion of individual freedoms, has fallen behind on an issue that's almost a courtesy measure in other places? Of course, detractors point out that removing suppressors from the NFA could lead to an uptick in crime. But let's be real, criminals rarely use suppressors. They're expensive to acquire illegally, they add length to the firearm, and in the rare instances they do appear in crime statistics, they're typically homemade or obtained in ways that circumvent all laws anyway. The legal route under the NFA hasn't stopped criminals who are determined to break the law. It's only been a barrier to regular folks who comply. Plus, we've seen data from countries that allow suppressors with minimal regulation. Their crime rates don't show suppressors creating a wave of silent murders. It's a fear rooted in Hollywood movies and sensational headlines, not in hard evidence. Another angle to consider is the effect on small businesses. There are many local gun shops and smaller manufacturers that specialize in suppressor technology. Right now, these businesses have to deal with complicated ATF paperwork, long wait times, and an uncertain marketplace. If suppressors were removed from the NFA, the number of interested buyers would likely skyrocket, boosting sales for these businesses and encouraging innovation. We could see a real growth in American manufacturing in this sector, which is a win-win for our economy and for shooters who want better, more affordable suppressors. But there's a hidden detail here. Some states have their own sets of laws regarding suppressors. The Hearing Protection Act includes a measure to preempt those extra taxes or special registration requirements, effectively standardizing suppressor ownership rules across the country. That's a big deal. If your state currently taxes on additional fees or tries to keep separate records for suppressors, those barriers would be nullified. This is both a pro-freedom measure and a logistical benefit for folks who travel with their firearms. Imagine the relief of not having to worry about crossing state lines only to discover your suppressor is frowned upon somewhere else. Still, the question remains, can we get enough momentum to make it happen this time? The House is probably the easiest step because it's more representative of local districts and there's already a wave of support there. But once we hit the Senate, that's where your voice matters more than ever. If your pro-2A senator is on the fence, or if you suspect they'll vote against it, now's the time to apply pressure. Call their offices, write letters, send emails. Remind them that you're a constituent who cares about hearing safety, firearms freedom, and common sense reforms. Let them know that removing suppressors from the NFA is not radical, it's practical. And if we can educate more people that suppressors aren't the ominous tools Hollywood makes them out to be, we just might tip the scales enough to get this across the finish line. There's also the element of public perception to consider. Anti-gun groups will almost certainly spin this as a dangerous deregulation. They might argue that it'll lead to more gun violence. But we know the reality. Responsible gun owners don't buy suppressors for criminal activity. They buy them to protect their hearing and be courteous to the community around them. Whenever you see someone in the media claiming otherwise, ask for the data. Challenge them to present evidence that legal suppressor ownership leads to an increase in violent crime. They won't find it because it doesn't exist. The best thing you can do is share accurate information with friends, family, and even on social media. You never know who might be on the fence simply because they've been misinformed. Now, let's address one of the bigger what-ifs. What if there's another unfortunate high-profile incident that derails the momentum again? This has happened before, right when similar legislation was close to being voted on. We can't control when tragic events occur, but we can control how we respond and how we keep the conversation factual. The importance of not letting emotions entirely dictate policy decisions can't be overstated. Of course, no one wants to be insensitive to victims of gun violence, but the data shows that suppressors aren't tied to mass shootings or the vast majority of gun crimes. We need to stay vigilant and correct the record whenever sensational stories aim to use tragedy to block laws that frankly shouldn't be controversial. There's another twist that you might not see coming. If the HPA does pass, it could set the stage for challenging other cumbersome firearm regulations. Once politicians see that removing suppressors from the NFA doesn't cause a surge in crime, they might be open to reevaluating other archaic or redundant firearm restrictions. This could be the beginning of a series of long overdue reforms. Of course, that depends on whether or not gun owners remain active and vocal. We can't just celebrate a victory and then go silent. Keeping our rights protected requires constant vigilance and engagement. We also have to consider President Trump's stance. While it's too early to know definitively, the current political climate is unpredictable. We can't assume any president will automatically veto or sign without public pressure. Sometimes, if the legislation passes with a large enough majority, the president might sign it even if it's not their personal priority, purely because it reflects the will of the people and the legislative branch. That's another reason your calls, emails, and votes matter. Politicians pay attention when their offices are flooded with messages. You might feel like one voice doesn't matter, but collectively, millions of us can make a difference. If you've stuck with me this far, I'm guessing you feel the same way. Let's keep this momentum going. If you haven't already, please share this video with friends and family who might not be aware of the Hearing Protection Act. Before we wrap up, we want to say thank you for all your support. Please help our channel grow by clicking on the like, subscribing, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching.